Welcome to the International Teacher Podcast with your host, Matt the Family Guy, Kent the Cat Guy, Jacqueline from JP Mint, and Greg the Single Guy, bringing you episodes from around the world about the best kept secret in education. You've got it, international teaching. Welcome to the show. Welcome to the International Teacher Podcast. Once again, this is Greg the Single Guy, and I do have JP Mint with me. It's a little bit late in the evening for us, so Kent is not here. But how you doing, JP?
Hello, Greg. I'm doing great in sunny Mexico.
Well, I'm excited tonight, JP. We have a guest on this time. He's an author of children's books, and he's also an author for educators. I'd like to introduce from Southern California currently. This is Neil Rosen. Welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks very much, Greg. JP, enjoyed being here with you, and thanks for inviting me.
Can you tell us a little bit about your background, maybe in education? It sounds like you're a children's book author, and you might have some education in your background.
Oh, just a little bit. Yes, I started out as a teacher when I graduated college. I have degrees in education and psychology. And I taught elementary school in a public elementary school, taught grades 4 and 5, taught for about a dozen years. And then I went out into business and became the CEO of National School Reporting Services, which reported on every single public school in the United States and was mostly used by parents and teachers to help them find school districts where they'd want to live when they were moving. So a good place for them to live, where they could find the kind of schools they were looking for their children. And I did that for many years. And then when I retired from that, I started to write books, and I write children's picture books. And I've written about a dozen children's picture books, with some new ones coming out this year. And I also have a book coming out this year that is for teachers and parents, including homeschooling parents, that was written in the 1960s and 70s. And so it's called Rediscovering the Village, Classic Strategies to Help Your Children Develop a Lifelong Love of Learning. And it goes back to those days and talks about what life was like, but also strategies that parents and teachers were using back then that have sort of gotten lost in the intervening years. And one quick thing is the reason we decided to publish it now is because the current state of education has so many challenges that sometimes you can find today's answers by looking back at the past and see what people were doing back then.
I love that idea. It's almost like a time capsule of a book where you buried it, or in the backyard somewhere, somebody discovered it, opened it up, and said, these are still gems. Should put this out there. Is that kind of what happened?
Yeah, very, very similar. What we did back then, as when we were teaching and we were doing this project, we really did a project. What we decided to do was, as teachers, we noticed every year that there were a few kids in the classroom that really stood out, and not only for themselves and not only in terms of how well they got in grades or tests, but these kids walked into that classroom ready to go. I love school. I love being here. Whatever you want, let's go for it. Let's make it happen. And these kids were different. And we also found that over the years, more of these kids dropped out. Every kid walked into kindergarten that way. Most kids into first grade that way. By the time you got to where we were teaching, fourth or fifth grade, it was well less than half the kids, and only a few of the kids who walked in with that same level of enthusiasm. So we decided to study what was it about these kids that made them different. And we actually studied their families. We went into their homes, we studied their families, we studied the process, and we studied what we called the home learning center, the home learning environment. And we found significant differences in things they did that were really helpful to their children in two very specific ways. One was the home learning environment itself. The parents had set up a home learning environment that really focused on learning for the whole family. And children could see themselves learning, their parents learning, they had spaces to learn, they had things to do, that kind of thing. But the other thing is these parents tended to communicate with schools much, much more effectively, with their children's teachers and the schools as a whole more effectively than the children who didn't have this. And it was not anything that was particularly difficult to do. It was just that they were doing it. And by communicating with the schools better, they actually ended up getting more attention for their children, more positive instruction for their children, and it all just kind of multiplied upon itself. And we took all of those studies and we put them all together, but we never put a binding on it and we never took it to a publisher, and it just sat there. And then this teacher and I who wrote this book, we separated. We remained friends, but I went off and she stayed in education and I went off into National School Reporting Services. And we got back together and we were talking about it. Like what you said, we found the book in a box about 5 years ago. And we said, this really needs to be out there. So we've been working on it ever since. So you were pretty close to what happened. It sat there for many years in mothballs. As we joke now, it may end up being the last book published ever that was written in 1960s and 70s.
Oh, my gosh. Well, being an educator for like 20-some years, I have to agree with everything you just said. It really, I can see it in my students when the parents are active in their student lives, when they have an active space to study. And my parents always read, in my personal experience, my own parents, would read at night, and we were sort of reading with them at the same time. And maybe you saw patterns like that in some of these homes that you visited back then.
100%. And you're going to love this because it's incredible. It's one of the things I talk about all the time is reading with your children. Parents start out by reading to their children before their children can read, and they read with them to their children when they start to learn how to read. And once the children learn how to read, they just make sure they have lots of books to read, but they pretty much stay away from it. And I've started what's called the Family Book Club, where once a month, parents and kids all in the family read the same book. And then they have a meeting and they discuss the book, and they have a little book club just like anybody else does. But that goes on and on. So now you have a parent who's reading the same book their 15-year-old reads or 17-year-old, and the difference that makes in the internal communication in that family. Having something, it is hard to talk to a 15-year-old, 16-year-old. These are difficult kids to talk to often. But when you've read the same book, it's a very easy conversation.
Very true.
And in that conversation, you learn other things too. So reading is critical to show your children that you are a reading family and that you read. But it's also important to read the things your children read. And I've gotten a ton of feedback from parents, even with young kids, who are reading old books that maybe were classic to us for their 7-year-old or 8-year-old and 9-year-old. I forgot how great that book was. Oh, I really so they're loving reading a picture book for an 8-year-old. It's great fun, but more importantly, it makes a huge difference.
I love that idea.
Charlie and the Chocolate Factory comes back right away. I don't want to see the movie. I want to read the book. Like Lord of the Rings and stuff, as you get into 5th, 6th, whatever. Even third graders have read that before, and The Hobbit. Yep. I tell you, those are just off the top of my head. I mean, knowing those books.
Absolutely. It might be Harry Potter, but parents, when they go back to read those books, not only they enjoy reading the books, but a lot of what I think a great book, a great children's book for any age, is a book that starts a conversation. If it doesn't start a conversation, it's missing something. A great book, when your kid reads it, at the end of the book, should ask you a question. It should start a conversation. And that's what these books do. And Charlie and Chocolate Factory, I mean, these are great books that absolutely do that every time. Your kid can't wait to talk about it. And you've read it and you're talking about it. So, and it also stops, one of my pet peeves is reading becomes just another babysitter for parents. And it doesn't need to be. It's not just a television. Hey, kid, go read a book. It's the same kind of thing. But if you read it with them.
It's not a prison sentence, It's a celebration. It's not a permanent thing. I tell you one thing, I keep going back to my life because I read a lot, and so does Kent, and so does JP. And I know you do.
Absolutely.
All right, Neil? One of the things I'll share with our listeners here at the ITP is when I grew up, and I have I have always remembered my parents said, Greg, if you want to stay up an extra 30 minutes, you can leave the light on if you're reading a book. And I'd fall asleep with a book on my chest every day, every night of my early elementary years, I think. And now, as an adult, I do the same thing, but now I have an iPad reading it, right, or a
Right,
Kindle.
exactly,
But
exactly.
it was a gift. It was like mom and dad saying, "Here is a celebration, and it's a reward for you. It's not something you have to do if you
Yep,
want to do it." Right? Love
absolutely.
that.
And the other thing that goes along with that, which I'm sure you did too, and surprisingly has gotten blocked out a lot today, a trip to the library, even if it was
Oh
every week or
yes,
every other week, was an event.
Oh my gosh,
And
Saturday
yes.
and and,
Saturday
and
afternoons, I'd wake up, I'd have Saturday
yeah,
morning cartoons because we all love the cartoons on Saturday morning. Parents sleep in. But then Saturday afternoon, we'd hit the car, we'd go to the library, and I would always ask the librarian, what's the limit of books I can take out? And it was 12 at that time. So I could take out 12 picture books or, maybe a couple of novels. There weren't that many novels, though, maybe as I don't remember. I think it's really blown up, but I don't remember a whole lot of novels as a kid. I do remember a lot of picture books.
yeah, you remember the younger ones, which is true, but just to be able to pick out your own books, and again, for parents to have conversations about books. Johnny, I know you love Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, and let's ask the librarian, what are the books for someone who likes that book? I mean, it became a whole big thing, and not only to take the books out, but you'd sit and read for a half hour. It
Hmm.
was really critical. You're going to read the first chapter before we bring it home to make sure you like it, because you can only take out 5 or 6 or 12 or whatever the number is.
And the
So it
bookshelves
became
were
a
at your
it became
height,
a
so
deal.
it felt like your own
Yep,
little
absolutely.
world. Like you were just, and cushions on the floor and carpets, and you're right that they encouraged you to sit and take a look at the books. Sometimes I would read a couple of books while I was waiting to check out her books. I'd read a couple books before taking them out and then just put them back in the shelf. It's like, okay, good. I got 15 books instead of the 12 because I read three really quickly.
And if there are multiple children in the family, watching the older child help the younger child pick out books it's a pretty impressive thing to see.
Well, I need to say a shout out to the teachers out there internationally and back in their home countries that do set aside curriculum for just a half an hour each day, the curriculum monster, and just say, I'm going to read to my students. And that is powerful. I have done that for the last 20 some years. I've always read to my students and tell parents. They say, what can my son do to become better at, in their grades? And I say, read with them. Set aside a time and read with your student. If you don't read it together, at least let them see you reading, and that's happening at home. And I hopefully that reaches out to the parents, but they don't always listen, right?
Yeah.
But I love what you're talking about. I think it's great. Can you tell us a couple of your children's books that you've read, a couple titles?
That I've written, the ones that I've written?
Yes,
Yeah.
I would love to hear some of your titles.
Oh, okay. So one series of books I wrote is called Penelope and Jack. And the first book was called Penelope and Jack Together Apart. And it was written during COVID. And it was about two children who live in a city, in apartment houses, on balconies on opposite sides of the street. A girl and a boy, Penelope and Jack. And when they're stuck home and isolated at home, they develop a friendship across the two balconies. That becomes quite a deep friendship and goes into more depth later on. And the second book in that series is Penelope and Jack, the Girl on Misfit Hill. And whenever a kid gets in trouble in class, the teacher says, well, I'm going to send you up to Misfit Hill because that's where kids who don't fit in belong. And Penelope takes him up on the offer and leaves the classroom and goes and climbs Misfit Hill. And within a little while, all the kids in the class have left the classroom because for one reason or another, the teacher didn't like all of them. It was a very diverse group of kids, and they all get up on Misfit Hill, and the teacher's all alone in the classroom, and they're up there all day. And then Penelope, who's the aggressive one in the group, the proactive one, she suddenly feels sorry for Mr. Grumpus, the teacher, because he's all alone in the classroom. And she goes down and invites him to come up and join them on Misfit Hill and turns the whole thing around. So that's a good one. And then another series is called Skywatch, and it's about a series of cloud characters. There's Tiny, who's a thundercloud, and there's Twister, who's a spiral cloud, and all these different clouds, and they solve environmental problems on the Earth. So the first book is Skywatch, The Legend of the Summer Snowflake, and it's about plastic in the oceans and taking care of plastic in the oceans. And then another book for the novel, for 10 to 12 age group, is called Mila on Purpose, Grow Your Circle. And it's about a girl who goes back to school after COVID, and there's a new kid in the class who had moved to the school from Jamaica and looked different than the other kids in the class. And she really was very intrigued by the girl, but also very nervous about making friends. And she spends a lot of time at home and talking to her mother, and her mother talks about circles and all the circles you have in life, and how if you don't grow your circles, you get stagnant. You have your family circle, you have your friend circle, you have your school circle, you have all this, and you stagnate if you don't grow your circle. And so she ends up they become best friends, these two girls, and it's a fun book to read. And again, it's really about friendship and about love, that kind of thing in the books, and that book raises a lot of questions because the kids are a little bit older. But one of the things, Greg, that I wanted to mention to you, because I'm sure this is another thing you will remember, and it sounds like it's off the topic of education, but it's really not. One of the things we talk about in the book, and we took for granted when we were growing up, was being outdoors. Being outdoors, being in nature, even learning in nature, doing things in nature. I would never ride by a school or a park that wasn't jam-packed with kids on weekends and after school, playing sports, doing whatever. And now that's just not happening. So a lot of the strategies we have involve getting outside. And just a real simple, quick example, especially for parents who have multiple children, is once a week, a 15-minute one-on-one walk outside with one of your kids. Just a walk in nature. Get off the screens, take a 15-minute
Love
walk.
it.
You'll talk to each other. You'll be outside. Those are the kind of things that come up, but they were really active. Remember how it was back then as compared to today?
I do. And now I grew up in those years. Yeah.
Yeah.
I grew up in the 60s, 70s.
Yeah, we would go out and we wouldn't get back inside until the street lights coming on meant dinner time, and you had to go back inside.
Yeah.
And I love that you're reminding parents about this with their families, because I've seen teachers do it throughout the years I've been teaching, and Jacqueline, I'm sure you have too. It depends on which school, what country, but I've been in a lot of schools and taking out kids for reading, taking them outside for science, and just going outside. And but your message is also, especially for parents to do this outside of school, it promotes family time as well as getting a breath of fresh air and seeing what's out there.
And as well as getting you some of that one-on-one time which every child needs. It's the same thing about sitting down and reading a book with a child. At that moment, when you're sitting there reading that book with your child, it's you and that child, and the rest of the world disappears. Because families are hectic.
Yes.
And there are other kids, and there's interruptions, and there's phone calls, there's people coming in.
And it doesn't cost anything.
Doesn't cost anything.
Everybody can do that. Go out for a walk with your kids.
We used to do a lot of teaching outdoors.
As a principal, I remember being asked if teachers could take their kids out for a class, and I completely understood the need in some cases, if it were a weather unit and they needed to study the clouds and study the sky and everything, or if it was a science unit and they needed to, look into the grass and look for bugs and things. But my concern as a principal was you let one teacher go out with a class and then it's all mayhem, right? With all the kids wanting to go outside. Well, so what we had to do was get, of course, a Google Doc. I created a Google Doc and I had, the period out just so that people could sign up and they could all see that it was like legitimate. It
She's
wasn't.
so organized, Neil.
I
She's
just didn't.
overly organized.
I didn't want the chaos of the entire school being outside at the same time. You know, that would have been mayhem. So as it was, they could go out for 15 minutes of the period and do their unit of study or read under a tree. Like it could be just a reading activity. But
You're
this way
younger
it was
than
a
we are.
little bit more organized.
Yeah,
You're
you are.
younger than
She's
we
young.
are.
Yeah, Neil. She's not old like we are. Yeah.
We would take the whole fifth grade out, all 8 classes at the same time, and do different things with them and have different projects and organize outdoor education. I mean, learning in nature and learning about nature and learning to respect nature is such a huge thing that has to be taught at a young age. And parents alone don't do very much of that, anymore. So it's an important role for schools to take on.
It sounds like your new book is going to be a good reminder for parents of things that they need to reinvest time in
That's
with their
absolutely true.
kids.
And one other thing that is in the book, there's a lot of tips, and this really sounds hokey, but it's not hokey in a lot of ways, is the way they communicate with teachers. That has changed so much over the years. And very rarely now, I talk to a lot of parents. Kid comes home with a great score. Kid comes home with a piece of paper where the teacher wrote really interesting story. Just a little thing, nothing like that, right? How many parents today let the teacher know? Let the teacher know. Bobby came home today and he was so excited about the story he wrote. It was so great. And I just want to thank you for making this happen. How many parents do that? How many parents communicate with teachers
I know the
when it's
answer.
positive?
Not
Not
enough.
enough. And what parents don't
Yeah.
realize is
Yeah.
that makes a big difference, not only to your child, but it motivates the teacher. Teachers are more
To us as
motivated to be
teachers.
there and be in the
Yes.
room. And boy, somebody's actually appreciating what I'm doing.
So during parent teacher conferences, if I had a parent sitting in front of me and talking about a project that we had done in class, and I was a French teacher, so
Hmm.
you can imagine, like, on the list of priorities, talking about a French project around the dinner table. But if a parent talked about the project, it always just floor me that they had actually taken the time to talk to their child about what they were doing in French class. And yeah, you're right. It was extremely motivating.
Yeah. And parents used to do that, really used to do that all the time. They participated in school overall much more, going on field trips with the kids. We even had parents who would come into the classroom for projects going on in the classroom at that time. And now it feels like, and I have friends who are still teaching, and it feels like that everything with parents now is like knocking heads. That the only time they hear from parents is when they have something to complain about. And whenever the child does not do anything good, it's the teacher's fault. And if they get to know the teachers, they get a whole different perspective, which will also change their perspective with their children at home. And it just ends up with a much stronger education.
I'm at a loss of words. I'm just wishing that every parent would read this book when it comes out, because I'm hoping that more and more parents come in to see their homeroom, especially their homeroom teachers, communicating with their high school, middle school teachers, and the teachers, of course, sending just a note saying, "Hi, I just wanted to say it's a pleasure having your student in class," or sandwiching in something else. Maybe there's something they need to work on, but sandwich it in with, here's a positive, and then here's something to work on, and here's something
Yeah,
positive. So open that line of communication. But that's the solving every problem starts with communication
absolutely.
and parent communication. It sounds like that's your goal in life right now, is to really push that out
That's
there.
our mantra. And there's also stuff, educational stuff that parents, it's not something that would be top of mind, but that you would think of, you know? So, and this was in the technology part of the book. It is just so much fun because everything written back then in the 60s was really day one of computers. In the late 60s and early 70s, it was day one. And believe it or not, all the parents back then thought computers were great. You know why? Because they thought it would get their kids off the television, which was killing them. So they didn't realize that they were now going from one screen to
Yeah.
100 screens. And back then it was going to be the answer to all their problems. So we use a lot of the technology in the book, but another little, just a easy, simple thing that parents can do. And every piece of technology we have in the book can now be done with a cell phone. That's how much things have changed.
All right, let's take a moment for a little commercial about how to get in touch with us. You can, of course, find all four of us at the itpexpat.com. That's www.itpexpat.com.
Or you could also find us at email at internationalteacherpodcast@gmail.com. We look forward to hearing from you.
Or if you're into Facebook, we have a new Facebook group at www.facebook.com/groups/ITPexpat, where you can find all kinds of inside information about ITP Expat.
You can also find us on Instagram at ITPXpats. That's with an S. ITPXpats is our handle.
All right, and thank you, listeners. We have over 100 countries represented by our listeners, and though we're not monetized, we are here for you, and we would like to thank all of you for listening. So let's get back to the show. I was going to say, have you updated the 8-track,
Not at
cassette,
all.
and LP stuff?
Not at all.
You didn't change any of the technology?
It's in there exactly as it was, with only a note in an introduction that says most of this can now be done with a cell phone. Because tracking your kid around the yard with one of those VCRs was like craziness. Your
Oh
arms
my
would fall off.
gosh.
But one thing, like for example, if your kid is making a presentation in school for 5 minutes, sit down and video them at home making the presentation, and then just talk to them about it. It just makes them, it takes you 5 or 10 minutes, and it makes your child 10 times as comfortable walking into the classroom the next day to do it. It's a game changer. And then he'll get so much more positive feedback. All of these things are about that, are about generating positive feedback with the entire homeschool relationship in both directions. And it builds on itself. And that's what makes these kids so excited when they're juniors in high school to walk in that door every morning.
Neil, can we talk about the opposite end? However, can we talk about helicopter parents for a little bit? Because while you're talking, I'm thinking, yes, some parents do that, but almost too much, where they're nitpicking a child, no, you got to stand up straighter, and don't forget to do this, and don't forget to mention this. And so
Micromanagement.
is there sort of like, I mean, of course there's a happy medium, but have you seen the pendulum swing too far in society sometimes?
That's another book. I mean, that really is. And other people, I don't know if people have written it, but there are some books there. Yes, there are definitely parents who get too involved. What I saw, though, that was more, it was stranger, and I understand what you're talking about, but it was the same kind of thing. I found when parents got too involved, they sort of shifted away from their child. Their child all of a sudden starts to become a victim. And I don't know why that is. All of a sudden, the school's not doing the good job. The school's not right for their child. The school's causing these problems. If the teacher was better, he would have gotten a higher score on the test. If something like that happens. And they get too involved on both sides of it. And it really is another problem to be dealt with. To be honest, with all the parents we talk to, I find the biggest problem is parents who want to help but really don't know what to do. They really don't really know what they should be doing different at home, how they can be doing different things at home. And that's the audience that this book is really looking for, is parents who just want a little help. They don't have a lot of time. They're in a terrible time squeeze. Little simple things they can do in the car, things they can do in 10 or 15 minutes, things they can do in 20 minutes a month, not an hour a day, that will allow them to just help their children really love to learn. Because a lot of parents have lost that for themselves. Greg, you read now as much as you did as a child, but a lot of parents have lost that. They did read, they did enjoy it.
Yes, they have.
And it doesn't take that much to remind them. A lot of parents like when they have.
Were you one of the lucky ones,
I'm one of.
Neil? Were you a lucky one that had parents involved, or is this was this reactionary because you didn't have that?
My parents were involved, but they were kind of involved just enough. They were the kind of parents who they weren't going to read books I read or stuff like that, but they did read all the time. They did take us to the library every week to read, and they always made sure we had books to read and that we were reading and enjoying it. And they always went to parent-teacher conferences. They did all the things that needed to be done. They unfortunately weren't outdoor parents, which I think is a huge thing. A new children's series that I'm writing, which will be published in 26, is called "Can You Read Nature?" And it's about teaching kids how to read the sky and read a pond and read a flower garden and read a national park. And because I really,
Name a
yeah,
tree, name a flower.
I think getting outside is in these days is so critical. I think everything we have going on with the environment, if we don't take children and really turn them into people who are going to care for this environment and make sure that whatever we're doing to damage it gets changed, we're really in trouble as a world.
Can you tell us a little bit about why? Can you tell us a little bit about why the 2026 is the editing, or sorry, is the publication date? Can you let us in a little bit behind the scenes? Is it for the editing process, or is it for the? Where does that date come
Well,
from?
it's two things. It's for the editing and for the publishing process. So as Greg will soon learn if he starts to write children's books, you sit down and write a children's book in a couple of hours in an evening. Then you spend the next year editing it. I mean, when you're writing a book that's 500 words, every word has to be perfect. It's really as simple as that. And it's amazing how much you go through to make
Wow.
that happen because you don't have any room. You don't have any fluff. It's all got to be right there. Then when you work,
And it has to look perfect too.
yes, then I'm
Yeah.
saying then you have to get not an illustrator, you have to get the right illustrator, and you have to get the right editor, and you have to get a book designer. It's an illustrator does the illustrations, but a designer decides what the book's going to look like, where the words are going to go, how the illustrations are going to go, stuff like that. And then you have to market and start to market a book 3 to 6 months before actually putting it out. But even with children's books, it's the same thing. It's this coming soon, and watch for this, and here we go, and then eventually you have a big book launch for it, and you get it out there on Amazon and in the other booksellers. But it's a long process to get that done, and it really though for me it's really mostly about getting it right, and maybe I overdo it a little bit. And today, one of the things that's interesting is today it's even more because you have to be, what's the right word for it? You have to not only edit a book to make sure that it's grammatically correct and spelled correct and all of that kind of thing, but it has to be, I'm losing the word here. It has to be non-ethnic
Relevant?
and non-racist and it has to be
Politically
Okay.
correct. Yeah.
politically, and you need to have a book edited specifically for that to make sure that there's nothing in there that's going to piss off a large group of people. Don't know if I can say that on here, but I did. Sorry.
Sure you can.
Maybe representative too.
Yeah, yeah. And so that takes a whole nother level of editing than you ever had to do for a book before. Yes, and represent it.
Well, I can tell that you love it
I
because
do.
it comes out in the way you talk about your books, the way that you love what you do. You can tell just from talking to you for a short time that you are thoroughly like this is your passion.
Yeah,
It's
it is.
obvious.
My wife laughs at me. The other day we were having breakfast in a little diner, and there were some people sitting next to us with this little kid, and this little kid was putting up this fuss and putting up this fuss, and I ran out to the car and I grabbed the book and I brought it back and I sat down and read with him for a while. Had no idea who
Wow.
it was. Had no idea. The family looked at me like I was crazy, and then it's like,
And you didn't get
no,
arrested for
no.
that?
But then they all got up to leave, and I did get a big thank you. But I made their breakfast more pleasant.
That's a joy
Nice.
story right
Yeah,
there. That's
fun.
great. I love it.
Yeah. And one thing to think about with your international audience, in a way, some of this stuff, and I'm not sure, I haven't worked a lot with an international audience. I don't really know with teachers or with parents, but it seems to me that some of these things, like a learning-centered family household and communication with schools and teachers like that, might be even more important there, where parents are so moving overseas and being an expat somewhere. Seems to me that there's a lot of time consuming that could, if you're not careful, push your kids to the side a little bit while you're so busy getting yourself acclimated to where you are. So it could be useful in that kind of a situation also.
In response to that, I can guarantee you that everything that we have talked about today and during this episode is relevant in our community, because we are just teachers. And I mean that by saying we are teachers just like in the States or in Canada. We are all over the world. So we're reaching out to parents and students, and we want our kids to succeed. And I think what you've talked about is relevant to everyone that listens to this show. And that's one of the joys of having you on this show, to talk about the parents and the children being more of a unit and learning together, reminding us of what we need to do. So thank you very much. It is relevant in every sense.
When we wrote this book, we were teachers. And we wrote this book as teachers working with parents. And we gave this information to parents to use. So teachers can still do that today. Teachers can use this book, not giving a book to read to parents, but pulling some of these things out of it, these strategies, which would really be helpful in those specific situations to help parents get more involved. And when they have a parent-teacher conference, here's something you might want to do at home. You might want to start a little family book club at home. Here's how you do it, that kind of thing. So we wrote it as teachers.
We might have to explain what a VCR is and what an 8-track is,
exactly,
of course. But once we get past that, I love the fact you left the technology in there.
Well, and Neil, one of the reasons I went overseas was because I found that the family unit was disintegrating, first of all, and that, as you were pointing out, more and more responsibility was on my shoulders to raise the children that were in my classroom. And also, it was very confrontational, that parents and teachers were not on the same side for, raising this child to become a great human being. I always felt that that was my role in life, was to help get to become the best person in her capacity. And parents didn't see that, or some parents, found that very defensive towards the teachers in their child's life. And so when I went overseas, I was very happy to find, I would almost say, like old-fashioned style of parenting, where parents and teachers were on the same page and we just wanted the best for their child. But slowly that has also been happening overseas, where the parents are getting to be kind of defensive or aggressive. And I think more than ever, we need a book like this that unites parents and teachers on the same side. We are there for the child.
I'll tell you one more thing, Neil, about international teaching. We call this show The Best Kept Secret in Education, because overseas, a lot of us, and with regards to, in fact, all three of us that host the show, we have more respect overseas as teachers than we do back in our home countries. And that's across the board. And that's, I'd say, the majority of the teachers I meet overseas in these international schools as expats, they get a lot more respect, which is a good news. It's a new little secret for everybody, but it's wonderful. And I think that, like JP said, this can only enhance that kind of communication. The more communication we have with parents, the more ideas we have for them to bring their own family together, it will be more respected,
Exactly.
right? So, yeah,
that's why
you.
we named the book what we named the book. It's Rediscovering the Village, and it comes from It Takes a Village. And it does, and when parents and teachers realize they need each other and they come back together, that's when education is going to turn around and start going back in the opposite direction, in the better direction than the one it's gone in, where they're, like you said, confrontational and at odds with each other. To raise a child takes a village, and that village consists of parents, caregivers, teachers, and others in the community. We used to always bring in firemen and policemen and other people into the schools to talk to the kids and be with the kids and do things like that. And even businesses in the schools, we'd bring them in you know how they did that, to talk about what your daddy did and all that kind of stuff. You need a village. It takes a village. And that's why the title of the book came from. If there was one thing our book could do, it would be to bring back that sense of people working together. It's a total success. Rediscovering.
Well, I saw a meme the other day online, and it said something like, yeah, it takes a village to raise a child, but who's going to tell the village to get started?
I'll volunteer.
And it sounds like you are. You and your fellow author.
Yeah,
yes,
I will volunteer.
you're doing it.
Sure. Yeah.
When is the book going to be coming out again?
In August. And I will let you know.
In August, okay. And the name of the
book.
book.
I'm happy to send you each a copy.
Ooh.
Rediscovering the Village, Classic Strategies to Help Children Develop a Lifelong Love of Learning.
Excellent. And you're Neil Rosen. Who's your co-author, Neil?
Gail, Gail Simpson.
Okay.
Yep, the two of us. And it'll be available on Amazon.
Do you have a website?
I do.
How can we get in touch with you?
I have a website, and it's in two pieces. One, you go to NM Rosen, Rosen, www.nmrosen.com. Okay? And when you get there, you'll see the page is split in half, and half of it is The Village, which is about rediscovering the village and other books I've written for adults, and the other half is The Nest, which is about all the children's books, and you'll see it there. And I write my children's books under the name Professor Stork.
Ooh.
Stork, which was an old nickname. So nmrosen.com. You can also go to professorstork.com. Either one goes to the same place.
Tell us about Stork. How did you get your nickname?
Professor Stork. It's a funny story. I was in college, and after I was a tennis player. And I am tall and skinny and long arms and look like a stork. And I had a pretty wicked net game. And I used to be called the Mad Stork. And one day in class, somehow we were talking about it with my fifth graders, and they were joking about it. And one of the kids said to me, well, here, you're Professor Stork. So that's where it came from the kids. And that's where the name came from.
Out of the mouths of babes.
Neil, I'll share with you, my nickname is Mr. Chicken. And the reason they call me that, I was teaching in Venezuela. I was teaching 3-year-olds. So preschool kids, I had about 10 of them in front of me. And it was the first day of school or second day of school, and the kids couldn't say my name. And one of the kids had always watched me write chicken into the program that I was teaching them with and heard me saying it to the assistant that was with them in the class. The little kid raised his hand the next day and he says, Mr. Malloy, Mr. Chicken. And because of that, when he said that, all 10 or 12 kids started laughing, and we didn't do anything for 20 minutes but laugh. Because every time one kid would stop laughing, they'd look around and everyone else is laughing. So it kept going and feeding off of each other.
Sure.
It went through all the grade levels. Pretty soon grade 12s were calling me Mr. Chicken. And I kept it for then on because you know what they do when you have a nickname like that is they smile. Mm-hmm. So 10 years later, I'm still introducing myself to the little ones as Mr. Chicken. So I'm glad to meet another Professor Stork, right? And we'll come up with one for JP Mint. I love that story, Neil. Thank you for sharing yours.
What made you a great teacher? What made you a great teacher was you were able to go with it.
Absolutely embrace it.
You were able to, because most teachers are like, they'll put that wall up right away. You call me this. This is my name. There's not room. So congratulations to you, because people who can do that and parents who can do that makes a very big difference. This has been great. I've been
some of the best lessons that I've ever taught were the ones that you didn't, you come in, you're sort of like, okay, I think I want to talk about this. And then one student's question totally sends it off in a different direction, and before you know it, you've had a great time of getting to know them. They get to know you a little bit better,
moments.
Lessons sometimes are even better.
Nothing like the lessons where you put a picture on the board and just say, "Write me a story about this picture," or do something like that. And you can't believe what comes. I mean, that's what you have to be really open to with children, right? Is that there's no right or wrong. What comes if they are safe in that environment and there's no right or wrong, and you put up this one picture on the board and have every kid in the class write a 2-paragraph or 1-paragraph story about it, what you are going to get back is mind-boggling. Mind-boggling. So different from every kid, and yet so revealing at the same time. It's that's education. That's learning. That's growing.
Well, after 12 years of teaching, you had a lot of information, a lot of things to write about. And I can see how you're still writing children's books even after working for so long and then working for the National Education.
National School Reporting Services. Yeah. Gathered information on every school and learned a lot about parents.
What's next, Neil? You're writing stories, you're writing children's books, you're writing a parent book.
Next is the nature series. I'm really
Got it.
I'm hoping that's going to be a long series with lots and lots of books on how to read nature and how to get outside and just go do things in a learning environment. But one that where you can just really grow and really expand as a human being and get off your screens. I mean, it is, I have to, honestly, part of that series is my way of trying to help kids get off screens, get outside into nature. And because it says on the books that these books are read outside books.
Unplug.
Right.
Unplug,
Not
right?
just about, it's not reading a book about a pond. Go to a pond. Look and see. Do you see these kind of plants? Do you see these kinds of fish? Do you see what kind of birds are around? What else do you see? How clear is the water? I mean, all these things you're going to learn. But take the book and read outside. They're read outside books. So I'm excited for them to come out. But Rediscovering the Village first.
Neil, have any of your books been translated into other languages? I'm wondering if, Spanish is out there or French or.
They have not yet. I've never looked in that direction. And one of these days I will.
Because I would think that they would be a big hit overseas as well, with a lot of our parents, international parents, looking for more and more children's books in their own languages. It could be a
Well, I'd love
possibility
to
for
send them
you.
to you and tell me what you think once you see them. Just send me your addresses and I will send you these.
I'm a
Yay!
voracious reader.
Love
Free
to do that
swag.
because this is great. You guys
Yes.
are doing quite a service. So it's really wonderful because you're creating. I don't know how many people you have following you, but I'm sure it's growing like crazy, and especially in the international market, it's so people feel disconnected in so many ways, and you're bringing that together. So it's really good. It's really nice.
Well, that's why we have guests like you on here is to really spread the word about a lot of things. And it comes down, the heart of it is that we are educators just like back in home countries. We're just in a different place. We're still doing the same thing that every fifth grade teacher does in the States, we do overseas. Every principal working, we do it overseas. Every admin and superintendent, there are small schools, big schools all over the world, and we're spreading that message. So your message is going out across the world, Neil, that parents need to get back outside into nature with their kids, spend more time together, right?
Right. And it is one thing you can tell everybody to do. It's to go to my website and just sign up for the Family Book Club. It's absolutely free. And once a month, they will get for different age groups 2 books. Pick one to read with your kids, for this age, for that age, pick the book. And I supply them with the book, a little synopsis, and also some conversation starter questions so that they can then have a short family book club meeting, 20 minutes once a month, ask some questions, favorite character, why, whatever it is about the book. And it doesn't cost anything and it'll
Oh,
bring them
wow.
closer together.
What a
Yeah.
resource. That's fantastic. Thank you so much for that because, I mean, you've just made it a lot easier for somebody that is not in education and thinks that's kind of daunting. How do I start a family? Made it so easy for them, especially with the
Yeah, and they'll
recommendations.
love it. I mean, that's the thing, Greg. You've seen it. I've seen it. You've seen it. It's just like it's a little thing that makes a huge difference. I guaranteed the parents, and it's all true, that by the 3rd month they're going to be looking forward to it more than the kid is.
Hmm.
It's
That's
about so
awesome.
much more than the book.
the way to know if people really love it, if the child really loves it, is cancel it one night and see what happens. And I know for a fact that the child will be like, so when are we going to do it? Let's do it tomorrow then if we can't
That's
do it
right.
tonight. I mean, that's right there, the giveaway.
But the parents get like that. The parents get like that. Because anytime you sit down one-on-one with your kid and have a discussion, something comes out of that discussion that blows your mind. Something comes about something going on in school, something happening with a friend, something happening here or there. You read a book and, boy, do you know anybody like that? And yeah, my friend Joey's home. I didn't know Joey was like that. And it really is. It's a great time for parents. And sometimes it brings parents, it gives them a chance to unwind a little bit too. Sometimes parents don't always realize, man, I've been so busy. And they'll sit down with the kid for the family book club. It's like, wow, this is the first time in the last few weeks I've really had any one-to-one time with them. So it keeps them aware too of what's going on.
I don't know where to go after that. I think this has been a wonderful conversation. I'm inspired. I'm not a parent, but I'm an uncle of 8, and I have lots of students. And I can't wait to share this episode when we publish this, because it's a great idea to just get that communication going with the parents, right?
Yeah.
How about some final words, Neil? Do you have any final message for our listeners?
Yes, rediscover the village. Just get back into the habit of working with people around you instead of against them, not only in education and everything you do in life. Just get back into the habit of appreciating the village, or as I talk about in one of my books, appreciate your circles. You have so many circles that are close to you. Expand them, appreciate the people in them, and it'll change your life.
And Neil, I'm going to start carrying a children's book in my bag so that if I ever come across, a child that's a little fussy in a restaurant or in a store, I can sit down and read with that child. 'Cause I love that idea that you had one in your car ready to go.
That's great.
Great story.
Great stuff.
Well, this has been the International Teacher Podcast. Our guest has been Neil Rosen from Southern California currently. This is Greg coming from the Middle East, JP from her living room in Mexico, going to go outdoors and spend more time enjoying Outside Unplugged as we read your new books that are coming our way. So thank you very much for being on our show, Neil.
Thank you both for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank
Have a
you.
great week and a great time. And I'll talk soon.